Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about overwriting and how to fix it. Let's first talk about what overwriting is. Personally, I identify more as an underwriter, so I don't have a lot of experience with overwriting, but I'm going to try my best. I've read some articles for these tips, and also I've just used my brain. I've thought of tips of like how to fix it. Also, if you're wondering, I posted the underwriting video last week if you want to go see that. Basically, overwriting is diagnosed by sort of rambling, going in circles, too prosy, too much detail to the point, it's a little confusing, and also your books just end up being like so long. Like standard will be like 100,000 words and you're pulling up with 300,000 word like fantasy. Like that's overwriting, where it's just like too much writing. On the other hand, if you were wondering, underwriting is basically like the opposite of that. It's a lack of detail, it's a struggle to stretch scenes out to be long enough instead of a struggle to make scenes short enough. And like it's a struggle to add to your book versus a struggle to take away, if that makes sense. That's kind of how you can tell which one you have. Also, just so you know, there can be like varying degrees of how intense underwriting and overwriting are. Like I said, I identify more as an underwriter, but I don't think that I am like a clinical level of underwriter. I just have been told by readers that they would like a little bit more description of like settings. I feel like I sometimes will just say like they went to the beach and that's it. And then early readers are like, what's the weather like? Are there clouds in the sky? What's the sand feel like under their toes? Like I have a problem with just like that, I think. Also, readers have been like, I have read 3 chapters and I have no idea what your character looks like. Like I forget to describe these little details sometimes, but not like a huge underwriter. So you don't have to be like a crazy overwriter. Like I was using like extreme examples, obviously. You could just struggle with sometimes getting to the point of a paragraph or having like an emotional conclusion. You could struggle with too much word count. Like it doesn't have to be extreme, but that's kind of the difference between the two. Overwriting can be harmful in a couple of ways. If you want to talk about publishing, it's very hard to get a book that is way over the word count, even like a little over the word count, published. If you're self-pub, you can do whatever, but it's really hard to get people interested in a really long book. And like your book should be whatever length it needs to be, but make sure that it's not too long, because it's like if you are writing like a fantasy, I don't write fantasy, so maybe I'm out of line, but I don't really see how a 300,000 word fantasy is like necessary. Like split that in 2. Do 150 first book, 150 second book, sequel. You got 2 books there. Like that feels a little bit more realistic to me. I think the limit for like romance novels is like 100,000. So if you're doing like 150,000 word rom-com, it's like we're getting a little bit crazy. We need to cut things down. We need to make it concise. So it can be really hard for publishing. It can be really hard for marketing and like interest if your book is super long. Obviously, lots of super long books have been successful. There's no like golden rule of like what works, because writing is just like it's luck, and it's also just connecting with people. Like the rules, you can bend them a little bit, but just putting it out there that it's more difficult if you have like a huge word count and a huge book. But that's just on like a publishing level. On a storytelling level, having too many words and too many scenes and too much description, it can be distracting to the reader. It can take away from the emotional punch, because there's just too much. You know, underwriting is not enough emotional punch. Overwriting is too much emotional punch to the point where it takes away from the emotional punch. Overwriting can slow the pace of your story and make it not super like addicting and like page turning to read, because there's just too much bulk. So let's talk about some tips of how to fix it. My first piece of advice I also gave in the underwriting video, and for a very similar reason: try outlining. For some reason I always get scared to suggest to suggest outlining on the internet, because I feel like a lot of writers love the excitement and like kid on Christmas morning feeling of discovery writing and like sitting down and just letting it fly. Obviously that's so much fun, but you can do that still within the confines of an outline. Like, I feel like outlining can help with underwriting and overwriting because it helps you see your plot all spread out right in front of you, and you can see what can be cut, what can be combined, what is necessary, what is not necessary. I feel like plotting helps a lot with pacing. If you are someone who struggles with pacing, try plotting, if that makes sense. And when you are plotting, make sure you do it really in depth. I have a plotting video, not to self-promote, but I have a plotting video of my wall technique where I tape up story beats on the wall, and it'll be like starting point, inciting incident, midpoint, rising action, midpoint, blah, 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 like all the beats. And I will then print out my plot from my document, like whatever ideas I have of just like scattered scenes, and I will tape them on the wall under the beat that they go under, and then I can see what needs added, what needs cut, what needs combined with something else, what sort of plotline is going on for too long, what plotline is not long enough. Also, when I do that, I try to track and add my character arcs alongside the wall, like with sticky notes. I'll be like, character starts this place, character starts to think about this, starts to realize this, then they take a turning point for the better or the worse, and then like I try to track everything just to make sure it's all good. Like, I make sure that my plot at its very core is good. I make sure that if there's a romance, I make sure that the romance is paced decently well, and then I make sure that my character arcs are paced good, and I feel like that helps. Paced well. I feel like that can help with overwriting and underwriting, both of those, to just like kind of take out the guesswork of pacing, like at the very beginning. Then you just kind of have to, then once you have that outline, you just have to kind of worry about not describing too much when you're already in there. But you don't have to worry anymore about like your, yapping getting out of hand, because you've already planned what it is you need to yap about and when, if that makes sense. So I feel like outlining can help. My next tip is to make sure that every description and every emotional reaction paragraph is necessary. And then also make sure that the description is effective. It shouldn't take 3 paragraphs to describe how something feels. Try limiting the amount of metaphors. Just use 1 per emotional reaction, or per I call it a tangent or a ramble or a monologue when like I'm kind of writing paragraphs about my character's internal thinking. I call it like a monologue. Try to effectively and like concisely portray what it is you're trying to say, instead of rambling on and on with metaphors and parables and memories and similes and all of that. Like, just try to do like 1 paragraph, have like the emotional reaction, something that it triggers, how it feels physically, maybe a metaphor. That's it. You don't need to go on and on and on. Rambling on and on can be confusing to the reader and can take away from emotional impact. I feel like I've had the most emotional impact from like a single line in a book, when they just do a paragraph, and when an author just does a paragraph and it's like the most heartbreaking line, and it's like 4 words. It just hits so much more effectively than like rambling on and on about how they feel. Keep in mind that being concise and straightforward often can increase emotional impact. And then when it comes to description, make sure that every description is necessary. Like the example that I used in the underwriting video, I'm just going to use it again, was walking into a school, because there's a popular writing tip and I gave it in the underwriting video. Not to keep mentioning the underwriting video, but I'm kind of assuming that you watched both. I don't know why, but whatever. I said use your 5 senses to kind of build out that description and like place your reader in the world, but make sure that you're not taking that too literally. You do not have to use all the 5 senses at once. Use the ones that are important, effective, and communicate what you want. If you walk into a school, I feel like the smell of the school and the feel of the school floor under the character's shoes is not important. Whereas if you're writing like a scene outside, describing the smell and the feel of the air and the ground underneath, that's a little bit more important. Does that make sense? Like, make sure that every single thing that you are giving detailed description on and painting a picture of, make sure that it's necessary. Just don't focus too hard on like describing every little thing. Leave some things up to your reader's imagination, if that makes sense. Like, let them fill in the blanks. Don't describe too much. Don't describe too intensely. Pick a couple of things, and by that I mean maybe literally a couple, like 2 or 3 descriptions, like 3 sentences, as opposed to like an entire paragraph describing every little thing. When you enter a new scene, or when you enter a new room, or again, back to the emotional. This is kind of a twofer. Just make sure you're effectively communicating via your words, like effectively communicating to the reader and not just like rambling and over describing. Make sure that every single description, when you are editing or when you are writing, when you're either writing or editing, make sure that you are just reading every line and being like, is this absolutely necessary for this scene to make sense, to paint the picture that I need to paint, to expand upon this character's emotional range and their emotional journey. If you're saying no and the line is kind of just there for extra detail, I feel like you can cut it. If it's already been mentioned before, if it doesn't matter, you can definitely cut it and cut down on your word count. My next tip is cut out or don't write anything that is repetitive and says the same thing over and over. That's something that I feel like I've noticed in books that I'm like, they overwrote this so much, like this book is too long. They'll say the same thing over and over and over in just different ways in the same paragraph. Or even like in another chapter, I'm like, you already told me this. Saying something one time is plenty. In fact, it's more effective than saying it over and over, because when you say it over and over, it takes away from the emotional punch and also just makes me angry as a reader, because I'm like, I know this already. Like, do you think I'm dumb? Make sure that you aren't treating your readers like they are idiots. Readers can fill in the blanks. Readers can read between the lines. Readers can remember something from several chapters before. And if they cannot, if they don't, it's not your fault. Like, it's not your thing to worry about. Just make sure you focus on telling an effective, concise, clear story, and try not to be repetitive. Next tip is, next time you are writing, next time you sit down for a writing session, try to write with a word count for the day. Or like if you struggle with overwriting and your chapters are typically 5K, try saying, I'm gonna write this chapter in 2,500 words, like half. This will help you. This kind of is like an exercise to help you fit everything that needs to fit into a smaller box, which is kind of just like practicing writing more concisely. And it can give you something tangible to actually work on instead of just being like, write less descriptions. That's kind of like abstract advice. Like, that's not something you can like, there's no physical rule book of what that looks like per book. Plus, like, you can't cut out all descriptions. You need to kind of know which ones to do, which ones to leave. Like, it's kind of like up to you and your story of what you want to leave, what you want to cut. But if you do this exercise and you literally give yourself a word limit, then it kind of gives you something to actually do. And you have to tell the scene that you wanted in a shorter word count. That's actually something you can physically do to practice, so that in the future you can write without having any like restrictions on yourself. And it just kind of builds that pattern of like being more concise and being more clear. Figure out what is necessary to say, because you can't go over the word count, so you can only include things that are necessary, which just helps build that muscle of, again, being more clear and concise. My last and final tip is to be merciless in editing and like cutting excess stuff. Editing can be really hard, especially for an overwriter that needs to cut things out, because you can get very, very attached, I know it, to scenes, lines, plot lines, and you're like, I don't want to cut it, I just love it, but it's bulking up your story too much, it's too confusing, it's too much. If it's a line you really love, but you've already said it in a different way, you need to cut one of them, but you love them both, all of that. Like, it's very hard to edit, and it's very hard to cut your work. Like, it's hard because you put so much effort and time into making that sound pretty, and you just don't want to cut it. But I do feel like a lot of the fix for overwriting comes in editing, because then you can just kind of overwrite if you'd like in your first draft, and then when you're editing you can kind of fix it and make it more concise and kind of apply all the tips I mentioned in this video instead of restricting your writing creative self. If that works better for you to just like edit it later, you have to be ruthless and cutthroat and just try, I know it's hard, but try to remove all like emotional attachment to your writing. I know that sounds impossible, but just like, I call it editing mode. I have to get in editing mode where when I'm reading my book, instead of being emotionally attached, I'm reading it and being like, that is the stupidest line I've ever heard, cut. Like, you have to get into this very like cutthroat, judgmental mode. Cut anything that doesn't make sense, or like just like maybe like highlight it so you can change it later. Like, just mark your pages up. Don't be mean to yourself though. You worked very hard. You wrote a book, you're editing it. That's impressive, but be critical of the work, you know? A tip that I have if you struggle with cutting because you are too emotionally attached, keep a separate document where you just have cut lines and like cut scenes and things that didn't work for one story but you can use in the future. Like, if you write a metaphor or some sort of beautiful prosy poetic line that works really well but it doesn't fit in this story, it's too much, it's overkill, you can just copy and paste it and use it in a later work, and then it's still yours. You're going to still use it one day, but it's not weighing down your story. So yeah, that is all for today's video. I hope that these tips made sense. I hope that these tips were helpful. I hope you got something out of it. Please let me know if you have any questions. Please let me know if you have any overwriting tips of your own. I love when people share their own tips in the comments and we're all just kind of helping each other. Go watch the underwriting video if you want to see kind of like the counter of this. Please like the video if you liked it and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a really great day.